Hello, QITalktimers, and welcome to QITalktime today. The focus of today's QITalktime is the focus of person-centeredness, enabling everyone to flourish. So we have a few people in the room today with us. We're delighted to have people from both services and from the National Person-Centeredness team with us today to talk about their experiences. So we have Margaret, who's going to wave, Margaret and Lorna, who both work as part of the national team here in the quality improvement team. Margaret and Lorna work with the academic partners in Queen Margaret University to lead out on the national programme to enable cultures of person-centeredness. We also have in the room today, we have Anita White, and Anita works in addiction services in Dublin North, and she's passionate about person-centeredness and is going to share some of her experiences of her journey implementing the person-centeredness journey in her team. And then we also have Anne Clafferty, so thanks a million, Anne, for coming today. So Anne has come from Mullingar. She's a speech and language therapist and graduated in Trinity and has worked in Mullingar since 2015 and has been very active in the programme of person-centeredness in Mullingar and has completed further studies in person-centred dementia care prior to involvement in the national programme. So just a little bit of housekeeping for everyone online. So we want to keep it as interactive as possible, and there's people from all over the country joining into the webinar. This is recorded, so therefore will be available afterwards for people to watch back. So there is sound on both the computer and also on the phone, but the quality of the sound is always better if you dial in. So the phone number is there, and Naomi, actually, if you wouldn't mind putting it into the chat box in terms of the event number to put in. Keep your questions coming. We will have time at the end. Any comments or questions? And I know there's some people online who've actually participated in the facilitator program, and we'd like for you to share any kind of nuggets of your experiences with us over the comments and chat box as well. And keep the questions coming over Twitter as well if you have anything you want to say on that. We're at QITalktime. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Lorna, who's going to start the conversation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you once again to Roisin and Naomi for this opportunity to talk on Talk Time and to share some information about our programme. Anytime technology comes my way, it always plays up a little bit, so I take the blame for that myself. We were asked to talk about our national programme here today. So it's the HSE national programme to enable cultures of person-centeredness. And we thought that we'd focus on what we mean by culture, so the focus of the programme and where the programme sits with regard to enabling a culture of person-centeredness. So it is me again. I think the system knows it's me and refuses to move. Thank you. So we use a model of culture called developed by Edgar Schein. We think that this model is very clear. It's clear to understand, and we are able to see our path way for culture through this model. So Edgar Schein says there are 3 levels of culture. We have an outer level, which represents the artifacts and symbols, and they include mission and vision, our dress code, our behaviours, what is easily viewed, heard and felt, but hard to understand. And looking at the recent patient survey that was carried out here in Ireland, one of the areas that patients said that they had difficulties with was the area of communication, and particularly around how staff communicated with each other. So I think that would fit into that easily heard and felt, but hard to understand. The second layer is around espoused values. And the espoused values are the things that are espoused, for example, strategies and goals, our philosophy, not necessarily lived or experienced, and not realistically evaluated either. So at this stage, it is espoused, what we say that we do. And the third layer, which is the deepest layer of culture, according to Shine, is the core layer. And that's the area of unconscious, taken for granted beliefs and assumptions that we know drive behaviours, relationships, and perceptions of reality and truth. And that's the area that this program is focused on, where we can work very well with the artifacts and symbols that are already there at the moment. We can also work with the espoused values, but what we want to do is actually look at the assumptions of what is real and true about our culture. Describing culture, culture is a very complex thing to understand. And what we say about culture is that it's like being on a merry-go-round. We're talking about workplace culture, so we're not talking about the organizational culture as such, the bigger piece. It influences workplace culture, but actually workplace culture is where culture is most felt, both by staff and by people who use our service. So that's where we are focused on the program. And we say that there is a merry-go-round of culture. And on that merry-go-round, the area of assumptions is hugely critical to how we plan and carry out our everyday work. And these are the unconscious practices and actions that take place every day. They're based on assumptions. We don't even think about what we're doing. We're on autopilot for these assumptions. They're unconscious practice and actions that become routine over time. So they're unconscious, they're practices and actions that are routine. Thanks, Roisin. These routines then become rituals. And we're all familiar with rituals, certainly notice them when we come into an organization for the first time. It's around the way we do things around here. These rituals, over time, then become fixed, and they're accepted or assumed to be the only way. And once they become the only way, then we are on that merry-go-round of unconscious behaviours and actions. Now, we can get off the merry-go-round of assumptions, but in order to do that, we need to engage in conscious practice. And the conscious practice involves me, you, and us together unpicking and discovering our reality. What is real and true that's out there? Not what we espouse, not what the symbols portray about us, but actually that assumptions area of what is very real and what we feel every day. We need to do this in a non-judgmental way. And we need to work with structures and processes and ways of being that enable us to co-create the culture that we want, so that we can all flourish in that. What do we mean by flourishing? And what has flourishing got to do with culture? Well, flourishing is hugely important because when we flourish, we are the best of ourselves. We give the best, we're the most productive, we are the most creative, we are the most passionate, where we're in that flourishing space. And it's the most nourishing space for all of us as human beings. But what do we need in order to flourish? And unfortunately, as human beings, flourishing doesn't happen just naturally. It's something we have to work at. If we plant a seed and give it heat and water and the right kind of soil, that seed will flourish naturally. But unfortunately, as humans, it doesn't work that way. So we have to put some effort into it. And what Maureen Gaffney, who wrote a book on flourishing in 2011, said was that there are 4 things that all of us as human beings need in order to flourish. We need to be challenged every day, and that has to be at a level that is healthy and manageable for us. So it's healthy challenge, and that needs to be there in our lives every day. We need to feel connected, and that connection is about connected with what's going on inside for us. What is happening inside, and connected with the people that we're working with. So we need that level of connection, not the disengagement and autopilot that is required in order to be on a merry-go-round of assumptions. We need to have a level of autonomy, and that autonomy is actually to have autonomy over the challenges that come our way, to be able to manage those challenges. And the final one, she says, is that we need to be able to be ourselves, our whole selves, the things that make us flourish and the best of ourselves. And we need to be that both in and out of work, so that we don't leave ourselves outside the door, but actually we bring the best of everything we have about ourselves into work. And we need that to be valued by the people we work with. And they're the 4 key things that all of us as humans, both staff and the people that we provide a service for, need to be in place for us to flourish. And now I'm going to hand over to Margaret, who's going to tell you how this can happen.
So, good afternoon, everyone. So, from what Lorna was been talking about, if we feel that we're on a merry-go-round and we want to get off,
Hello. Sorry, everyone. We're just back again there now. We had a little bit of a disruption with our sign, so just bear with us. We're just coming back on. 2 seconds there. There we go, Margaret. Sorry, we'll pick up with Margaret again. Thanks.
Thanks, Roisin. So, hello, everyone. And I'm following on from what Lorna was saying about this being on a merry-go-round and being unconscious about the way that we can be in our work. And if we want to get off the merry-go-round, how do we do that? And the national programme to enable cultures of person-centredness is one way that helps us to be conscious about that and to provide a way of getting off the merry-go-round, essentially. And this conceptual framework is just a picture of areas in the program that we focus on that helps us to unpick and to uncover where the assumptions are in our work, so that we can improve them and we can do better if that's what we want to do. And you can see on the framework there that the program helps us to know ourselves better, to know others better, people on our teams, to develop ourselves, to develop others, so that we all have a better experience and that there's better outcomes from the work that we do for ourselves and for the people that we provide a service to. Just a little bit about the program on the next slide. Where it came from, it was mandated by the Director General, it was Tony O'Brien, a couple of years ago, and it had come as a result of reports that had come out at that time. Some were specifically from ID services. It was obvious that there were very good people who were well trained in services, but there was something in the culture that wasn't enabling them to be the best they could be at all times and wasn't supporting them to do that. And that's where this program to enable cultures of person-centredness came from. So we started in 2017, and there was a directive at the time to focus initially on intellectual disability services, but on all others as well. So we had 2 programs that year. About 60 people from about 40 sites took part in the program. In 2018, we had the same again, about 60 people, and again about 40 sites involved. And that program is just finishing now at the end of April in this year. And we will be running programs again in the coming year, and there'll be information about that available on the QID website, Quality Improvement website. On the next slide, what do we know about the program, and what difference does it make at program level? And so we evaluate as we go all the time. The program, it is a year long, and so there's lots of evaluation built into it. It is quite intensive. People come for an initial 5 days and then for a day a month. And when they go back to their workplace, they have to work with people in their work team, in their local work environment. So it is a big investment from people. And so we do evaluate it as we go along. At this point, we know that at the end of the first year, the people who participated in the program were very positive about changes that had occurred in the 5 themes that are on the slide. They were more conscious about their work and about person-centeredness. They had transformed, and it had brought person-centeredness to life for them. They had developed skills to be able to facilitate person-centeredness with the teams that they were working with. And they were sharing responsibility for this work, and they were able to demonstrate the learning that had happened for them. But it wasn't all rosy either. There were very definite challenges, and that tree kind of symbolizes that there was good and flourishing times, but there were some challenges as well as people went along. So what really is obvious from the learning, and we know it from the literature as well, is that culture work is very slow, and it takes a couple of years to see improvement, and it's that faithful, diligent work that leads to that improvement. It takes time and patience, and that's for us as well as for everybody else. From the program point of view, is all well and good, but the more meaningful story about person-centeredness comes from the people who participated in the program and how that has impacted on their way of being and their work in their workplace. And so I'm going to hand over to Anita, who works in drug addiction services in North County Dublin.
Thank you very much, Margaret and Lorna, and thanks for the opportunity to actually join you today to go into a little bit of detail of the impact on services that this program has actually had. I commenced the program in April 2017, so it's almost 2 years ago. And I suppose in preparation for this webinar, I did a little bit of reflection on my own journey over the last 2 years. And I suppose that's really where the real impact has been for me, is to do that piece of personal reflection and see where I started and where we actually are now. And I remembered the first day that we had on our block of 5 days, and we were then in Cork, and the first 2 questions we were asked were, do you understand person-centeredness? And it was about, the other question was about our facilitation skills, so we had to facilitate. And I answered my questions as I thought I understood person-centeredness. And my understanding of it was actually only a portion of it, because I believed person-centeredness was about the end user, that the service user, that they would experience a good service. But in actual fact, person-centeredness is about more than one level, and it's about starting with self first, which I now in reflection truly appreciate and understand. And then the second question was around facilitation, and did I believe that I had a good facilitation style, or had I got a developed facilitation style? And while at the time I believed that was the case, again, 2 years on, I realised that I was a good trainer and I wasn't necessarily the best facilitator in the world. So the programme over the year that we were intensely working with the national team was very, very, very interesting. It was a very slow process. it was about coming together on the ground with people who believed that culture change was possible, but also were brave enough to realise that actually it's at the level of assumption that we really need to be looking at how we can and how we will change culture. So I came together with a number of my colleagues from all different disciplines, and we basically set up a team that met in the Phoenix Park, which is a beautiful location, once a month. The facilitation style that we learned over the year was about enabling people to get out of their heads and to become much more creative in their thinking and to be much more comfortable with who they actually are, not just as a certain member of staff and a discipline, but who they were and how that affected and impacted their behaviour in their job. So together we came up with, we identified our values, we identified individual values and group values, and we developed a mission statement for our service. This was a long process because it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to actually, as I say, get out of our heads. And that's what we actually did. We gave the time and we dedicated ourselves to doing that. So 2 years on, what we now have is a group of people who still come together once a month. We still meet sometimes in the Phoenix Park. We go to different locations now. We have identified key areas of development for us as individuals. So they would be around communication within the team, staff support, staff training, staff development. It was a lot around language, how we speak to each other, how we speak about each other, how we speak to and about our service users. And we're only now really starting to develop our transformation programs piece, which are coming from our core values. I have to say it's been an absolute privilege to be working on this project, or this program. It's definitely not a project. It's a life change. It's a developmental piece for each individual who, as I say, is brave enough to actually say, you know, I think I want to look at what I do and why I do it and what my assumptions are. We're definitely going in the right direction, but it is a slow process. Again, I want to just thank the girls, the ladies, Margaret and Lorna, for all the hard work that they have put into supporting us. And I suppose the piece around the national programme is that we have started to work together as a national network of like-minded individuals as well, who support and learn together. And that, again, is another huge advantage of this national programme. So, yeah, if you have any questions, yeah, I'll certainly endeavour to answer them. So thank you very much.
And we might hand over now to Anne from Mullingar, who's going to give a little bit of her perspective. And please do, if you have any practical comments or questions, if you are thinking about doing this in your own services, please do type in the comments and questions into the chat box. We will have plenty of time at the end. Some people seem to be having some challenges with sound. Just to make sure that you dial in, the sound is better quality over the phone. But we've checked it here and our sound seems to be broadcasting fine over the internet as well. So it might just be a local problem. I'll hand over now to Anne, okay?
Thank you very much. So yeah, I'm just going to add, I suppose, the perspective of my team in the Regional Hospital in Mullingar. I'm a speech and language therapist there, and we commenced our journey with the national programme to enable cultures of person-centredness just last year. So we're still kind of a part of the year-long programme piece of it, so we're still kind of exploring and learning. In terms of the team, through, I suppose, volunteering, nominating, some of us maybe being volunteered to be a part of the team. There are 12 of us, facilitated by Professor Brenda McCormick and Margaret Codd here beside me. And we are a mix of people. So we're from a number of different disciplines, therapies, payroll, HR. Our CEO is part of our team as well. And we're from kind of all different walks and grades and management, frontline. And I think that that's probably a big difference compared with other kind of programs or projects that I've worked on, is that kind of diversity. Other projects I've worked with have been, you know, kind of maybe a frontline group working in one area, and you do your piece of work, then you report to senior management, they report back to you, and there's this kind of us and them, whereas with this program, it's much more, you know, we're all working towards the same goal and we need to understand each other, and that's really been a big difference and really been a strength of kind of moving everything forward. I think formally we're probably known as Cohort 5, but through our shared work and working on our values and beliefs, we came up with our own team name of Team Inclusive, because that kind of represents where our vision, our values, our beliefs, and where we want to go with things. I suppose from a practical point of view, it's already been explained that it's a year-long program, and we meet as a group, as Team Inclusive, one day a month, where we kind of regroup, re-energize, support each other. I suppose that's another difference with this program, is that yes, it's a kind of a lengthy commitment, but in actual fact, you know, we really value that, because with other programs and projects, sometimes you're kind of given the tools and then sent off, and there's kind of, to have that support around troubleshooting and, well, look, this happened, and to have that support from team members and facilitators has just been invaluable. So as Team Inclusive, we meet once a month. In between times, we reach out and we facilitate and do work with 3 formal culture change groups in our setting. The first one is the outdoor space, or the open team, and they are looking at kind of staff environment and staff workplace, and kind of how that's used to support and support us in flourishing. And the next group is the Hospital Culture Club, which is looking at kind of culture among staff. And the third group that comes together is the shared decision-making team, so looking at kind of processes, how things work around shared decision-making within kind of staff teams, and also with service users as well. The important thing to mention, though, I think it was actually on day 1 of the program that Margaret said to us, that even though, you know, we have the formal days and the kind of formal group work, person-centeredness and the changes in how we're working, you don't just switch that off. I mean, that's something that stays with you. You know, it's with me when I'm walking down the corridor, when I'm meeting staff, when I'm meeting service users. I'm thinking about their perspective. It's just kind of, I suppose now we're on to the difference that it's made for me personally. It's kind of given me that understanding and appreciation. And I suppose to kind of put that into kind of practical terms, everybody I work with wants to do the best for people and for service users. Everybody wants to do the best, but it's very hard to understand when you're trying to do your best why sometimes it doesn't always happen like you want it to. And it's, I suppose the value of this program is that it's helping us to understand you can't change something if you don't understand what it is. So it's very easy to bring in a form, to change a process, but to actually keep it going, you have to look at that culture, and you have to look at that. So really the difference for me is that I'm starting to understand that, and it's given me a way to actually change and bring things in and sustain things. Then from a team perspective, our Team Inclusive group, the difference that it's making is that you, I suppose you're meeting new people, forming relationships, understanding the perspectives of other people that we work with every day, and we're there for each other as a support to kind of bounce things off, to just keep that change and keep that drive going. In terms of then the formal culture change groups, the difference that it's making to those people is we're reaching out to all different parts of different departments within the hospital, bringing lots of different people together, and hoping we're kind of reaching out and spreading the word and bringing them on the journey as well. So it's not just for the people in Team Inclusive, it's that reaching out. And then for the difference that it's making to the hospital is, I believe it's making it a nicer place to work and to be, because it's all about understanding other people and understanding, you know, where people are coming from and how relationships work. So I will, I suppose, hand back to the group.
Thank you so much to everyone in the room for imparting all of their wonderful knowledge and insightful experiences that they've had on the ground. I myself actually also completed the facilitator program, and I must say it really did change my practice and definitely made me reflect very much so on myself and my own behaviours initially, and also we achieved some great achievements within our own team here in implementing the person-centeredness, and it is a long journey and you need to be committed, and I think that's something that we need to, I suppose, explore a little bit more, because I suppose in listening to you it does sound quite intense and a lot of maybe time, and people are very busy in their jobs. So just maybe to comment a little bit on that, how do you think you can incorporate this into your busy work life?
Yeah, okay, Roisin, no problem. I suppose really my comment on that would be that initially there is a huge time commitment, and from a point of view of attending the national programme, but also the facilitated sessions in the workplace. But this programme is different in that it enables us to change our practice, which then becomes part of our norms. So 2 years on, I can actually see, or we can see as a group, that when we're making collective decisions or when we're looking at how to improve or how to do things differently, we're coming at it from a person-centered approach. So we're not just looking at how we can, you know, measure with statistics and data and, you know, inputs, outputs. We're also looking at how all of the work that we do impacts on people, impacts on staff, and what support and what we need to be doing to enable them to do their job better, to do their job easier. And it's about looking at all of the different resources around us as well, because we are the largest organisation in the country and we have massive resources. So one of the big pieces of work that we do with our group is actually to investigate what supports are out there for staff, to enable them to actually learn new skills, to enable them to change their practice, but looking after their needs first to make sure that they actually have what they need. So, yeah.
Great. I see there's a question here from Valerie Toomey, which actually links nicely into what you were saying there. It's just, how do you actually know that the culture has changed? She's acknowledging that's a very difficult question to answer, but any insights at all would be fantastic. And anyone like to comment on that?
I suppose, hi Valerie, one of the things I suppose really about culture is that co-creating something new, and nobody is going to engage with this work if they don't feel that they need to. If they're happy with the culture as it is, and how relationships are as they are, then you're not going to want to change it. But if you're not happy with the culture you're working in, then it's that co-creation piece, that coming together, that critical exploration of looking at what is real and what's true, and actually looking to see how things can be different. And it's measuring it by that. So it's not a set of measures that we come with, because every culture is different. It's about co-creating something new together. That, I think, Anita and Anne described, have started to describe, is happening for them. And it's around relationships and ways of working.
And I suppose I can just maybe add to that. It's not something that you kind of get feelings. So I know when I'm working, when I go to a ward now, it's that feeling of people enjoying what they're doing. You can see it. It's not something you can necessarily measure, but you can feel it. You get comments from other departments maybe saying, how is it? Gosh, I'd love to work in this office with you, or I'd love to, you know, how are you getting on so well, and things like that. So it is also that as you say, it's very difficult to measure, but you feel it.
Can I just add to add one small piece? One of the ladies that works on the local group with myself, she has come back to say that actually, from being a part of the program, she has changed in work, but she's also changed personally. So she's now much more, she'd speak up more, she'd actually make sure that she has all the information she needs. And I suppose when you start to get feedback from people who you actually work with to say that they themselves are feeling the benefits from a point of view of their practice, but also as individuals and as human beings, then I think, yes, there's no measurement for that, but I think it kind of speaks for itself as well. So.
And just for the listeners online, I suppose both of you have done the facility or are doing the facilitation program. So it's just, I suppose, there are sites out there who are probably really interested in this work and maybe looking to get involved in it, and possibly, I suppose the key is that you have a facilitator working with the group. And I suppose it would be important to say that there is going to be another program, and if people are interested, that you could email either Lorna or Margaret, and they can give you some further information. And it is on the website as well. So if you go on to qualityimprovement.ie, yeah, it will be going up on the website in the coming weeks, imminently. Yeah. So the next program, when is that going to start?
It'll be, the dates are not set, but we hope it'll be probably the end of quarter 2, maybe the middle of the year. We hope to start the first program this year. Yeah.
Great. So anyone who wants any information on that, you can pop your email address into the chat box now, or you can follow up on the website. You'll see it through that. Maureen Flynn has also asked a question here. She's saying, thanks for sharing great practical experiences and your learning of person-centredness. Can you share a little bit more of how do you celebrate and sustain the development?
I suppose from a point of view of celebrating the developments, we meet on a monthly basis, and we do measure the success that we're having, and we articulate that within our own small groups, but also within our team as a whole. So we are very good at celebrating, but we could be an awful lot better. And then the sustainability piece, I think that comes down to the fact that this is not a project. This is a program for enabling cultures of person-centredness, which is actually a shift in behaviour. So that then becomes a sustainable way of working, because it becomes a part of our embedded practice. And that takes time. As I say, we're kind of 2 years down the road now, and we're really only starting to see that is embedded, and it's starting to embed in some parts of our service. We've a lot done, but there's an awful lot left to do. So it's that's how I would see that the sustainability piece moving forward.
Yeah, just from, I suppose, the sustainability thing, I mean, that's kind of the essence of culture change. I mean, the reason many of us have been involved in committees, projects, various things, and I've been so struck by the people that I've talked to saying things like, oh yeah, but we tried that, and oh, didn't we do that a few years ago, and what happened with that? And the reason that it wasn't sustained was because the underlying culture didn't change. So everybody out there, quality improvement is a huge part of our day-to-day work. But we're faced with this issue of, why isn't it sustained? And it's because kind of to date, this is the first program I've been involved with that actually addresses that culture change in order to build the sustainability. So it's not kind of an add-on. People have mentioned the time commitment. If you think about how many committees and how many projects and how many forums and how many things you've developed and the time that has gone into that, and it hasn't necessarily changed practice, the time commitment in this program doesn't seem as huge because it's actually about changing the culture and sustaining those changes.
It's so fantastic to hear you both speak so passionately about it. So I think a lot of people online are probably hearing that come across.
One thing I was interested in, I suppose, was the difference between this program, so the cultures, the program for enabling cultures of person-centeredness versus the HSC program, Values in Action. And just if anyone wanted to speak a little bit to that.
Thanks, Roisin, and I suppose it's a very interesting question that most people who are around the services would be wanting to know the answer to. I know certainly when we were actually in our program days, it was a question that came up regularly. And I suppose the best way to answer it is that the anticipated outcome of both programs is actually the same. Both programs are trying to achieve the same things, that culture would change. They're simply different methodologies for actually achieving culture change. And I suppose the organisation, in its wisdom, is that people are all very different and people change differently and people need different things to enable them to flourish and enable them to create a better culture for themselves. And Values in Action is a model of viral change, which is basically around the philosophy that people actually change together and that you have a lot of kind of inspirational people within the organisation who can embed change in the practice, where the person-centred culture piece starts at a much deeper level, where the participants look at their own assumptions, their own beliefs and their own value sets, and then change of culture comes from that. But I think they're very similar in ways, but they're also very different. And I know that both programs nationally are actually meeting together to identify the similarities, to also recognise and appreciate the differences and find a way of working together where appropriate. So I think that's really as much as I'd say about that one.
Fantastic, thanks a million. We have another question here, which is an interesting one, from Michelle Hardiman. And Michelle's asking, did you meet any resistance and how did you deal with that? And I suppose it was interesting what one of you said about, who came on your team. So, is it that people volunteer themselves or that people are told to go on it? And do you think there's a difference between the success of it? There's probably two questions there I've thrown in, one that I'm interested in, but also Michelle's. Sorry. So did you meet any resistance and how did you deal with it? And we might deal with the other question then thereafter.
So in terms of resistance, I suppose this program is very different. The content of what you're doing, people are very used to kind of coming out of a program day with an action plan and work to do. The types of activities we're doing, because you're looking at culture, it's very different. Sometimes there's painting, there's creativity, and that can be that's a shift in kind of how people work in work. So yeah, I suppose the resistance kind of comes from, oh my goodness, what are we doing and how is that coming? But I think the reason that maybe I've found myself that I'm able to deal with it is because at the start of the program I was one of those people. I wanted a checklist, I wanted an action plan, I wanted all of that. So I can kind of understand and empathize where people are coming from when they're like, oh, I don't know about this. And yeah, it's just if as Margaret always says, you trust the process, and once you're in it and you start to see those changes, feel those changes, that's when you kind of overcome resistance.
And just the second part of that question about, how do you build your team or those interested? Someone had mentioned about you opt into it voluntarily or people were sent on to it. Do you think there's a difference in terms of outcomes or participation depending on which one or both you come initially to?
Well, the experience that we had on our team was that it was a group of like-minded people. The grades weren't relevant, the disciplines, we wanted to have a balance within the disciplines, but when we walked into each of the sessions that we still do, we walk in as individuals, we leave our disciplines, our grades at the door, and we sit as like-minded individuals trying to achieve the same end in a different way to what's normal. And that works for us. Now, and I suppose other services, it would really depend on the service, whether it would be the people that I work with weren't nominated, they came forward themselves. And I think for us that made a huge difference, because we started in a space with little resistance. And I think that if people are told to go somewhere or nominated, or and they're not really sure they want to be there, I think all of a sudden you're where you're trying to build, you're putting obstacles in your way because the resistance will already be in the room. So,
in our setting, I think we possibly had some nominations to start with, and I think that was probably because maybe we didn't necessarily understand what the program entailed. I know some people thought maybe it was a one-day course, and got quite a shock when they came along. But I think with the nominations, that helped to identify people who mightn't necessarily believe that they should be involved. Sometimes frontline staff, you're like, well, that's not really me. That's management. That's for them to sort out. So I think through the nominations, in fact, we actually also did get a good mix. So that's for the core team, or what we call team inclusive. In terms of the kind of structured culture change teams that we work with and reach out to in our own hospitals, that is people who'd volunteer. It's also people that we've approached because we know some people who would be so good and who would make such a difference. So there's a combination of kind of nomination, a little bit of nudging, and plenty of volunteering as well.
Can I add to that, Roisin? So from a program level, I suppose, we have criteria about who would become involved from a facilitator point of view, and really at organizational level, what we would ask is that it is somebody who is supported by the organization, and somebody who's able to have an influence within the organization. The rank, the role, none of that, the grade of person, that doesn't make any difference. It's the influence that they can have and the support that they get. And we're much clearer, I suppose, as time goes on about the level of support that's expected, because sometimes organizations mean to support, but it's hard as time goes on. We're much clearer now, and so we outline it well on the application form that's online as well.
So it's great. I suppose the program has been in existence now 2 years. For 2 years. So the learnings of every time, it's continual PDSA, I suppose, isn't it? And just one last thing, and the chat box is still open, so you can squeeze in any last comments or questions before we close. Just wondering about patients, and obviously this will have an impact on patients, but are patients involved or invited to come on to the groups in any of your settings?
I suppose to date, our focus has been more on the staff, because in order to, I suppose, reach out to our service users, you need to understand where you're at and kind of what you're portraying, and in some cases the cultures just don't exist to kind of bring a service user into that and kind of put them on the spot and expect of them to kind of be able to participate and trust us and on all that kind of thing. So I suppose at the moment we don't have service users involved, but particularly in our shared decision-making team, I mean, we're definitely looking at that patient and public involvement, and it'll very much be, we're relying on the expertise of the staff within our team to kind of see how best we're going to involve service users in the future.
And if I may just add to that, so we have got some people who are involved in sites around the country where they have got their own people who use the service involved directly in their working groups, which is very good, but appropriate as well. So I think, what Anne is saying there can be a level of tokenism, and we have to be very careful about that, I think, so that we make this very real, so that people have a chance to actually have an impact. But all of this work indirectly must involve people who are using the service, whether that be patients, whether it's residents, whether it's people in residential services, whether it's staff whose service users are staff. all of that involvement can be direct or indirect.
And I'll just add to that as well. At the outset, when we were talking about the programme and the impact that it's had, and the question the first day in court, what you do have an understanding of person-centredness, and as I say, my opinion was I did. The service user is who we always think about, and that's the person who we always go to first. But what's different about this programme is that in actual fact, we go much deeper and we start with self. So I think in time for our service, the service user will become participants. However, at the moment, we are still working on the practice that's about ourselves, each and every one of us, how we impact on each other, and we're building that team piece, and then we will move on. And because the service user is the one that we always think about first. And I think to shift the culture, we need to spend a lot of time on the personal reflection, the team reflection. That impacts us in every part of our lives, in work, at home. And I think when we can start to see that change, that's when we should be bringing in the service user. So I think it's time sensitive as well. So.
Okay, I don't see any more questions coming in online, and I suppose we're coming up to our end of our time slot. So I just want to say a massive thank you to Margaret and to Anita and also to Lorna for coming today and sharing their thoughts with us and all of their learnings over their experiences with the person-centredness programme, and we'll hopefully even have you back again in a year's time to hear further updates of your progress. Certainly, I know somebody has put their email address in there for further information regarding the upcoming course. Please do contact myself or Naomi, and we can filter that on directly to the most appropriate person. Just to finish off, I suppose we have the National Quality Improvement Team have a strategic plan. It is up there online. The link is just below there. We are looking for comments. So if anyone online wants to comment or feedback on that, please go onto the link and you can do that online, and we'd appreciate that. And then lastly, just to say that our next QI Talk Time is again bringing in frontline teams to share their experiences on falls. So we have a number of health and social care professional teams coming from around the country that won awards at the recent Health and Social Care Professionals Improvement Quality Improvement Awards. So I think there's one from, well, they're from all over the country. I won't even try to remember. So we'll be really looking forward to that. So that's coming up. It's actually at the end of the month. The wrong date is on there, so apologies for that. It is the last Tuesday in April. So without further ado, we'll sign off, and thank you very much for joining, and we will see you hopefully at the next Talk Time, the last Tuesday in April. Thank you.